Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc. And here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do powerful interviews with people that are doing cutting edge work in the areas of healing or spirituality or social transformation. And I'm particularly excited about today's program. So if you're watching or you're listening, I promise this will be really valuable for you. My special guests today are Robert David Steele, who those of you who follow me know that I've interviewed Robert a couple of times before, and then a new person for our show, but certainly not new to transformation, not new to social justice, not new to being well known on the national scene, is Cynthia McKinney. And so I'm not going to take a lot of time giving you their backgrounds. I will link you to other shows that will cover that. But today I want to take more of a person-centered approach to this particular conversation, which is really a conversation about what you and I can do as loving, conscious, concerned Americans who love freedom, who love social justice, who love meritocracy, who love our country, who are very, very concerned, almost sometimes feeling hopeless and resigned about the nature of public life in this country, about the nature of politics. And speaking from my own personal experience, I have gone through this over the last few years. The more I awaken to what is really going on this planet and how the planet is actually run at a socio-political, economic level, the more I've had to deal with my own issues of hopelessness, my own issues of resignation. I've often thought about the character John Galt in Atlas Shrugged, about maybe I just want to take my marbles and a few friends and create an alternative culture and just drop out. I'm sure we've all had these kinds of conversations. And so at least these thoughts in our head. And yet there's something that keeps me from just taking my marbles and just going home or just doing something else. There's a part of me that feels like that's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm here in this lifetime. Somehow I'm here to be part of the rebirth, revitalization, recharging of public life in America. And of course, because of America's position in the world, having a ripple effect on the entire planet. And so, given that I don't want to take my marbles and go home, given that I'm pretty clear on my values, then my thinking moves more toward the strategic and tactical levels. And this is an area where I'm kind of out of my league because I have no direct experience in politics. I have no direct experience with the military. I have no direct experience with the intelligence agencies. And so this is where I am so, so glad that my two friends, Robert David Steele and Cynthia McKinney, are here, because they have in their own lives tremendous amount of direct experience in these areas. They have a direct, visceral experience of the deep state, how they operate, what they're up to, where their weaknesses are. And so with that as a background, this is going to be a conversation coming from a person-centered, holistic place that we're going to focus on the strategic and tactical ideas that Robert and Cynthia have about what people like me, people like you, what we can do over the next few years to take our country back and to create an environment where we feel proud to bring a new generation into the world. So with that, let me turn it over to Cynthia and Robert for any responses to what I said and any other opening remarks, and then we'll go from here.
Ladies first.
Well, your introduction is particularly powerful. And I think you made some key statements there on which I can elaborate. First of all, in my PhD studies, I've downloaded a dissertation, which I have not yet had a chance to read, but it gets to exactly what you're talking about. And the name of the dissertation is What Keeps Them Going. This is a dissertation that was written about women who have been in the social justice movement for 50 years, all of their lives. And there have been ups and there have been downs, but they never stopped. And so now, with me not having had the benefit of having read the study, but knowing that it's out there and I will get to it, let me begin by saying what I think keeps them going. One, I believe, is a strong sense of self. And so what that means is that they have taken the time to reflect on who they are, what their values are, what is important to them, and what their priorities are. What kind of United States do they want to see, and what kind of people do they want to be? So that's point number one. Point number two is that you get this, after you get this sense of self, then there's an understanding of your efficacy. You have a feeling of efficacy that, yes, I can accomplish my goal. Even despite what's happening around me, I can still see that rainbow that's at the end of the tunnel. I know it's there, even though I can't see it right now. I know it's there. I can feel it. And if I just keep going in my footsteps, I'll get there. That strong sense of efficacy. So what I'm thinking is that despite the ups and downs, despite the trials and the tribulations, despite the successes and the multitude of failures, despite our country not being where we know it should be, could be, needs to be, we still feel that we can take our country where it needs to be. That is a very powerful feeling, that feeling of agency, as you PhDs say. So I would say that the first ingredient is the strong sense of self. And I'm sure that that is exactly the kind of prescription that you provide in your shows, David.
Well, definitely that the strong sense of self is certainly a necessary condition, but as you mentioned, it's not sufficient. There's this other deep belief in efficacy that is something that is very important in this conversation that I want to address, because I know for me, getting to know Robert, for example, with his brilliant strategic and tactical mind, it's helped me as a person who comes to the conversation already with a strong sense of self, but not that feeling of efficacy. It gives me that feeling of a roadmap, of an efficacious roadmap, that if I, like you said, if I just put one foot in front of the other and share with other people about it, that there's a holistic logic to what Robert's come up with that makes sense to me. I know Robert wants to say something now.
Yes. I think the most important thing you said in your extended opening remarks was that humanity, and every human, has a responsibility. Humanity is a grand cosmic experiment. And I believe that the globalist agenda, the Agenda 21, all of these things, the deep state, they're trying to destroy family and community. Now, someone smarter than me said that all politics is local. When you ask, what can we do? I would say to every person who sees this video, Cynthia McKinney and I are asking you to go put your face in front of your congressional representative's face and say, if you don't co-sponsor the Election Reform Act and restore integrity to Congress, you will be fired in 2018. It's that simple. All politics is local. But the agenda, the whole system is rigged. I mean, Donald Trump said the system is rigged. And when he said the system is rigged, he's not just talking politics. He's talking academia, the schools. He's talking commerce. He's talking the media.
Administration of justice.
Yes, labor unions. Everything is rigged. Now, what I have to tell people is they're trying to destroy our values. They're trying to destroy ourselves. They're trying to destroy families and communities. And so the answer is you take back the power by going to your member of Congress, presenting them with the Election Reform Act, which we're going to try and get some legislative language written here in the next week. It's hard because we're on the road, but we're asking some congressional staffers and others to volunteer, and we're waiting to see if that happens. But the bottom line, David, is the members have become corrupt and have sold us out because we have abdicated our responsibility as citizens. If every member of Congress were to hear from 100 people tomorrow, if you don't co-sponsor the Election Reform Act, you're going to be fired. And by the way, if you sponsored the act that makes it a felony to criticize Israel and boycott Israel, you will be fired. Because that is, Cynthia McKinney and I are one against the Ziocons and AIPAC. The era of foreign control over U.S. Congress must come to an end. And it's not just Israel, it's Saudi Arabia and many others. But the bottom line here is we stand for unity at the local level to have integrity at the national level. And it's all about every single individual taking responsibility for talking to their member of Congress and insisting that their member of Congress pay attention to #UNRIG.
David,
excuse me.
David, I just want to say that it's not enough for people to speak to their members of Congress. We've got to speak to each other.
Yes.
And that is the critical ingredient that has been systematically and purposefully omitted from the equation. We have been placed in silos, ideological silos, and we have got to figure out a way to erode the silo so that left, right, center, center left, center right, so that we all can sit down at a common table.
Well,
And
this is
that's
why I think being able to delineate and language the common values that freedom-loving people on the right, center, and left share, that compassionate people on the right, center, and left share is so important, because once you can identify them, then if you can get people to agree with them, then you have a basis for that kind of communication that you're speaking about. Robert, I think you mentioned a couple of terms there that I think are vital for the conversation, that I think some people may not know what they mean. And so I'd like to give you an opportunity to expound on them. One is the Election Reform Act, and the other is AIPAC.
Very quickly, the Election Reform Act is something that I've been developing since 2011 when I spoke to Occupy. And people can find my original 6-minute presentation by going to YouTube and looking up Robert Steele, Occupy Election Reform. There are thousands of activists that have tried to focus on different aspects of election reform. What I have done is aggregated the best ideas from across all of those thousands of activists, and Cynthia McKinney and I have agreed on a 12-point election reform act that includes, for example, paper ballots counted publicly on site, because all of the electronic machines are rigged. And I want to stress that what we're presenting is the starting point for a national conversation. It is not a take it or leave it prescription. We want individual citizens across this country to understand that they could take back the power in the next 90 days, ethically, legally, and non-violently. That's why we call ourselves hashtag UNRIG Summer of Peace, to distinguish ourselves from hashtag resist Summer of Violence. And it's our $100,000 from donors against George Soros's $200 million, and we're winning. We're actually winning. I have a major lawsuit that I won't comment on, but if I win that lawsuit, it's the death of AIPAC. AIPAC is the agent of a foreign power. AIPAC is the single most important representative of the Zionist state of Israel in the United States of America. And I voted for Donald Trump because I believed him when he said he would put America first. Now he's betraying that trust. He is putting Israel first. Our Secretary of State is pursuing a foreign policy that is of, by, and for Israel. And that has to end. Now, the members of Congress are not stupid. They understand that when the power shifts, they have to shift with that power in order to stay in office. So what we're offering is a proposition that every member of Congress can be forgiven for their past obedience to the two-party tyranny and for their past dependence on 40 billionaires who represent the Rothschilds, the Vatican, the City of London, and so forth. And all members have to do to be forgiven is return to being the representative of their constituents. So we're asking constituents to make that case to the members. Dr. McKinney and I are educators, nonprofit civics educators. So we're calling on citizens to step up. All politics is local. Go grab your member by the shirt collar gently and say, if you don't represent me, I am going to fire you in 2018. And God bless America, because I think that's possible.
Do most people in Congress now, do they know about the Election Reform Act?
Probably not.
Okay.
Because, and that's the education job that we have to do. There also is the reality is that this is proposed legislation that has no language. And so you can't really call it an act. Yeah, I've been talking to Robert
rather than an act.
About the correct use of the language. So there is no act yet. We have to propose the language, and then that language should be drafted in legalese so that the members of Congress can actually look at it, read it, discuss it with each other, and then decide what goes, what stays. And the final piece of proposed legislation that actually gets introduced into the House of Representatives might be quite different than that which we're discussing right now.
Let me also say that the reason I didn't write the language was because my original vision, which we're running 2 months late because we've been under severe attack from AIPAC and others that are associated with the Zionists. The CEO of Meetup closed our $77,000 300 professional network of 435 meetups because he felt that we were attacking his Zionists, okay? At least that's my interpretation. He alleged that he closed us because I was pro-Trump. Never mind that Dr. McKinney is the alt-left black woman that sets the standard for the left of center group. So we've been under attack for 2 months. But my original vision was to raise $250,000 and do a 2-month educational tour with Dr. McKinney in which we got the citizens to discuss the 12 points before ever getting to legislative language.
Yes.
So we are, I think, succeeding in the face of enormous opposition from the Zionists, and I'm happy to be on their hit list because it means I'm doing something right for America. The citizens of this country need to understand that there is a media blackout on what we're doing. And at the same time, the CEO of Meetup is providing illegal, undeclared campaign contributions to the Democratic National Committee in that he has sponsored 1,087 hashtag resist groups for which he waived $195,000 in fees. And oh, by the way, they're co-sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League, which is another Zionist outfit that specializes in repressing free speech and in censoring individual citizens who try to put America first. So we represent, I think, an opening for citizens to have a national conversation, not only about America first, but about how to get their members of Congress to work for them rather than for the Zionists and others.
Great. A couple things. One is, for people that don't know, do you want to make a quick comment about the distinction between the Jewish people and the Zionist political movement?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that, because it's very, very important. The Zionists have specialized in creating a number of myths. And one of the myths and one of the things that they try to do is make any statement against Zionism a statement that is so-called anti-Semitic. Well, first off, Jews are not actually Semitic. They're not Arabs. They're from Eastern Europe. But the difference is that Jews are a religion and good, loyal, decent people. Zionists are a criminal network that is the most extraordinary criminal network you've ever seen. And it's penetrated every aspect of American society. And it's particularly strong in New York City, where you have two Zionist billionaires, actually one Zionist billionaire and one Zionist fake billionaire. The fake billionaire is Jeffrey Epstein, who is a Mossad agent who specializes in luring people, possibly including Donald Trump, into situations where they are videotaped doing bad things to small children. So this is a Mossad.
Or just doing bad.
Or just doing bad things. Thank you. So bottom line here is that our Congress is being both bribed and blackmailed. And let me point out that one of the tricks of the trade in the intelligence business, which Epstein is skilled at, is to lure a Congress into having drunken legal sex with a legally aged person. And then in the middle of the night, they're drugged, or they get to a point you switch out the legal age blonde with a 12-year-old child. Now you have the member of Congress having rabbit sex with a 12-year-old child. Okay, that's how you blackmail people. And of course, you also have the members of Congress being blackmailed by CIA, the FBI, and NSA. They are now in the primary business of spying on and blackmailing our members of Congress, which is why, in addition to the Election Reform Act, I've recommended to President Trump, and he did read the memo, I've been told, I recommended that he offer every member of Congress a pardon conditional on their giving up their blackmailers. In other words, a secret debriefing with the FBI where they say, this is how I'm being blackmailed, this is who is blackmailing me, and we take out the blackmailers. So I want our members of Congress to succeed and be reelected, but I want them to be free from bribery, free from blackmail, and I want them to represent the individual members of their constituency. I want integrity. That's the word that brought Cynthia and I together, integrity.
So a couple of questions. One is, I'm thinking about a couple of people in Congress who I think still can think fairly clearly and have a heart. Have you had any success in communicating with either Rand Paul or Tulsi Gabbard about what you want to do?
The short answer is yes. I was honored with a meeting with two of Rand Paul's political people, a guy named Doug and a guy named Serge. I have their last name someplace else. And we met for about half an hour in Rand Paul's conference room. And what they basically told me was that Rand Paul would introduce the legislation, but only if President Trump asked him to. And I have been unsuccessful at getting a meeting with President Trump, or even a 15-minute telephone call, which is what my last letter to him asked for, a 15-minute phone call to discuss the fact that, in my view, the Republican Party is going to be destroyed by a pedophilia scandal in the next 6 months. And if he does not lead #UNRIG himself, this was always designed as a gift for a legitimately elected president. If he does not lead #UNRIG himself and create a larger base for himself, he will go down with the Republican Party. I have also reached out to Tulsi Gabbard, and I have been ignored by Tulsi Gabbard. Her staff, her scheduler sent me basically a message saying, piss off. So Tulsi Gabbard, in my view, is starting to move over into the deep state, and she's starting to be trained to be a housebroken congresswoman, which is a shame because she is one of the most promising congresswomen for independent thinking from her Army background, in my opinion. I don't know if you want to say anything on this. No, okay. So bottom line is, what I think needs to happen is the citizens need to talk to their members of Congress, and we need to find at least one member of Congress that will write the legislative language after the citizens have discussed it. For example, we call for universal voting plus prisoners voting, which is for conversation. There are a lot of people that don't want prisoners to keep their vote. I personally feel that if you're a citizen, the vote is yours for life. And we've put a lot of black people in jail for marijuana recreational use, which is a strategy to redline their district so you can build condominiums for white people, okay? So I think prisoners should continue to vote, but I'm not here to say what it should be. I'm here to say, for God's sakes, people, talk about this.
I have a question. Let's say that the movement is effective in getting draining the swamp a little bit. What would you say to the person who would say, well, that's great, but the deep state is so powerful, it'll just get reconstituted? What would you say to that argument?
Well, that's probably correct if the proper groundwork hasn't been laid for independent citizen engagement.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your ideas about fleshing out what you would see at a tactical level and strategic level for this proper groundwork besides the elements we've already brought up in this conversation.
Well, I probably need to send the document to you, but basically it's my vision for #UNRIG, which to sort of operationalize this citizen engagement, providing solutions that work for the community of activists in each state that reflects the entire political spectrum that exists inside the United States. So, for example, I call them power cells, and we would have 50 power cells, one for each of our states. The power cells would mirror the political spectrum of opinion. So we would have populist left, center, center right, populist right, all at the same event, the same time, the same table. And these power cells then actually function as focus groups. The focus group then allows us to focus on what the problems are, what the solutions to those problems are. And the power cell actually becomes a local action committee. Now, the actions that are prescribed are the ones that after reflection and engagement, then we look and we say, okay, these are the solutions that will work for this set of problems. And then we begin the process of enacting the solutions, implementing those solutions. So basically what I see #UNRIG is an opportunity for people from diverse backgrounds to come together and solve their problems on a local level. As it was Tip O'Neill who said that all politics is local, former Speaker of the House. So we want to operationalize that in a way that makes a difference in the lives of the citizens of the United States. And we believe that #UNRIG has that capability.
Let me just say, I totally support this. Dr. McKinney has expanded my original vision. My original vision was just to tell people that they should have this conversation about election reform, and then they should go strangle their members and make it clear to their members that all politics is local, and if you don't protect us, you're fired. Now, what she's actually doing here is putting people over parties. Our concept includes the death of all political parties and the resurgence of people having civil conversations at the neighborhood level and direct democracy. The difference between us and John F. Kennedy, between today and the era when our president John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Allen Dulles of the CIA and J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI with the explicit oversight of Lyndon Baines Johnson, is we have information technology today that now makes direct democracy possible, to include all legislation being transparent, online, and votable by the citizens at the line item level. Last night, we had a 6-hour meeting with John McAfee, and that man is a genius. He is an absolute genius. And I totally agree with all of his criticisms of Google and Facebook and YouTube. These have become Zionist arms that are repressing all free speech from the center to the right. And they're accelerating the violent blood in the streets, as Loretta Lynch has said. They're accelerating the violent seditionist divide and conquer language. I believe that we're on the verge of a public awakening. And if we can have any small part in helping citizens understand that they can go force their member to represent them and not a party, then we will have done our duty as citizens of the United States of America, which we're both very proud to be.
David, let me just continue the thought with a statement of what my experience has been just since I've been on this RV for the past couple of days. I had the opportunity to meet a big #UNRIG supporter in my home state of Georgia by the name of Bob Brady. Now, the thing about Bob Brady is that from where he is situated politically and where I am situated politically, our paths would probably have never met. But because of #UNRIG, we were able to come together. And when we did come together, this left and right, what is it that we share a passion for? It's an end to the regime change wars. And he gave me a document called Move to Tears, where he quotes the Bible and he recounts his own experience about how he totally abhors these wars, from the Vietnam War straight through to all of these senseless wars now. And when you start talking about direct democracy and changing our political system, which is definitely something that is needed, I hasten to add that it was the country of Libya, through its Jamahiriya, that already had direct democracy. And yet President Obama chose to bomb them back to the Stone Ages, what Libya has become now. So this idea of direct democracy and people taking control of their own governments is not anything new, but who allows it to happen and who champions that cause? Maybe now it's time for the people of the United States to understand that it is we, the people, who must champion this cause. And when we free ourselves, we will end up freeing everybody else.
I agree with that so completely. And I would also say someone smarter than me said, follow the money. Well, the US government is a $4 trillion a year piggy bank that is owned by Wall Street, the Rothschilds, and the Vatican, and the Zionists. I mean, I don't know if people realize it, but we're giving $30,000 a year for every man, woman, and child in Israel. And they're turning around and using that money to bribe our congressmen and to genocide the Palestinians. This is just totally wrong. They're also trying to get Jared Kushner to give nuclear weapons to Saudi Arabia so that there can be a limited nuclear war between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Except Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons.
And so Iran, yes.
It will be one-sided.
And Iran is, in my judgment, Iran is the adult in the region. And I think the whole Israeli plan to balkanize the Middle East is very wrong. I feel that we should not be spending American taxpayer money or borrowed money on supporting a Saudi Arabian military, which, by the way, helped create ISIS along with CIA. And they have a 1 million-man military that's paid for by the U.S. taxpayer that can't control ISIS, in part because they created ISIS, okay? So my vision is...
They support ISIS. And yes. General Wesley Clark told us that ISIS was created by our friends and allies to defeat Hezbollah. So I take my students through this sort of rigorous mental exercise to understand exactly who is Hezbollah, really, not the propaganda,
Right.
and who does Hezbollah fight and who does Hezbollah represent. So once we get into the detailed realities of what U.S. foreign policy is, what the U.S. military is being used for, this is not to benefit the U.S. state interest. No, it is to benefit the interests of another country. And our young men and women, they are our babies. I see them in airports around the world wearing their military uniforms. They're babies. They're my children. And what they are being used for is to benefit another country. And then when they come back home to us, they are broken, they are warped, they are maimed, and we are the ones who have to take care of them.
Yes, and we haven't done a good job. I mean, we have over 75,000 amputees. We have over 250,000 people with PTSD, the mental gap business, and so forth. Let me make a statement here, because one of the things that I believe the Election Reform Act would make possible is direct democracy. Direct democracy would then make possible the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. It is absolutely insane to have the U.S. economy being run by private bankers. They're treating all of us like chickens. We're farm animals being harvested by Wall Street on behalf of the Rothschilds, the Vatican, and other satanic powers. So this is the beginning of the end of looting the American Commonwealth. I, for example, would recommend that we close all 1,000 of our military bases overseas, and that we terminate all foreign military subsidies, and we terminate all foreign aid to governments. In fact, my highest ambition in life is to run the open source agency. One of the reasons I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize was because, with the help of Marcin Jakubowski, who's an absolute genius, we have demonstrated that we can lift the 5 billion poor for 10% of the cost of what we spend now. For instance, a John Deere tractor costs $200,000 and has all kinds of legal and software and financial encumbrances. An open source tractor costs $20,000, and it can be repaired by the farmer in the field with plug and play open source parts. So this is actually the beginning of the end for globalists. It's the beginning of the end for war, and it's the beginning of the end of bankers controlling communities.
I understand. A couple of things. One is, have you guys pretty much given up on Donald Trump at this point, or do you feel that there may be a way to still have some kind of fruitful relationship with him?
Well, the fact of the matter is that candidate Trump told us that the system was rigged. And President Trump has done precious little to unrig it. Candidate Trump told us that he was going to end the regime change wars. President Trump is now increasing the number of troops going into Afghanistan and senselessly, needlessly bombed and killed civilians in Syria, and continues the bombing in Yemen and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Somalia.
The CIA drone assassinations all over the world.
Yes, everything is continuing. So candidate Trump portrayed a picture of what could be, but President Trump is not filling in the details as needed. Candidate Trump told us he was going to drain the swamp, and President Swamp.
President Swamp.
Yeah, President Trump has, I think, been consumed by the swamp.
Let me say that I think there's a very, very high probability that Donald Trump is being drugged, bribed, and blackmailed. I'm proud to know Roger Stone. He's a brilliant man. He's going to be interviewing us soon. And Roger has stated publicly that in his last several conversations with the president, he felt the president was under some kind of medical control. The president is being drugged. I do not trust anybody around the president, least of all Jared Kushner and Herbert McMaster, who's a vastly overrated general and also a traitor. McMaster co-conspired with John McCain and John Brennan to have the false flag event in Syria in order to try and put 150,000 troops in, which is what David Petraeus, who works for the Zionist firm in New York, KKR, wanted to do. So I think our president is literally being drugged and is a captive and is subject to external controls. I don't know how to solve that, except to say that if we can get an honest Congress, it doesn't matter who the president is. I mean, my worst fear is that Trump will be impeached or assassinated and Mike Pence will become vice president. Mike Pence is 10 times worse than Donald Trump, in my opinion. And Paul Ryan would be no better. So my focus of effort, in all humility, is to tell our citizens that if you want to fix America, you need to fix your member of Congress, and you have the power to do that in the next 90 days.
Well, I would just add to that, if you want to fix the United States, then you have to fix yourself.
And
ultimately, it boils down to us. We, the citizens of the United States, must be engaged in the creation of the U.S. that we want. And we cannot allow or believe that one individual that we cast a vote for, whether it's on the executive level or it's on the legislative level, or the judiciary, we cannot be led to believe that casting a vote alone is going to resolve our issues.
Right, and absolutely. I love the power cell concept because the idea there is to create a microcosm. In other words, I'm the alt-right white guy who's also Latino, and I had the privilege of getting to know Congresswoman McKinney in 2009 at a conference in Denver that Joseph McCormick sponsored on transpartisanship. And because I had the integrity to reach out to someone who is as far removed from me as possible, okay? I mean, we are black and white, man and woman, right and left, okay? Rude and not rude, okay?
Definitely rude.
Okay, I'm a hard-ass intelligence officer who tells it like it is. I believe in evidence-based governance. And God bless Cynthia McKinney, she believes in evidence-based governance also. So what we want people to do is have this conversation in diversity, treasure diversity. Unity of diversity is what leads to integrity.
David, here's at least from my experience with study, with my PhD studies, what I learned, particularly in a book entitled Two-Fisted Racism, is that basically we've been put in these ideological silos and we don't have the opportunity to get out of our silos and interact with people who are vastly different than us. And so what #UNRIG wants to do is to solve that problem so that Black Lives Matter is in the same room as the militia. Black Lives Matter is in the same room as Christian identity. Now, as a member of Congress coming from the state of Georgia, I'm a proud Southerner, but I have had to build a political career reaching out to people who are vastly different than me. And so I understand that I've got to actually walk in the footsteps of these other people in order to understand their positions. But we in the United States have not had the privilege of being able to understand where other people come from. So #UNRIG will give us this very safe environment where language doesn't count. I don't care how you speak to me as long as you're communicating with me with your heart. And I can be touched by your heart and communicate with my heart to you. And so then we get over this idea of political correctness and you can't say this and you can't say that, because we're communicating on a human level. We're communicating on an entirely different plane. And
I love that. I love that undermining of the deep state's divide and conquer and isolate strategy.
Yes.
I appreciate that very much.
Stop, please. Let me say something very important. Cynthia has talked to me about manufactured dissent.
Yeah.
And we both agree that Charleston was a false flag. The two opposing groups were paid protesters who drove to the event together. okay? That is an attempt to divide and conquer. We also both oppose this attempt to tear down Confederate statues and rename roads that were named after Robert E. Lee. The Civil War was a war of secession. The North wanted to loot the South, and that's why they wouldn't let them leave. But the bottom line here is all of these things are distractions. What we want people to do is have the conversation respectfully, civilly, and focused on restoring integrity to how we run our country.
Well, Robert might be certain about the false flag conditions that existed at Charlottesville. I have not taken the time to actually provide for myself the level of evidence that I need in order to understand that. But what I do understand is this, that a narrative can be created. An environment of violence and resistance can be created. And then what happens is that innocent people get caught up in a situation that has been manufactured. And
Absolutely.
That's why I discussed the manufactured dissent.
I understand.
So it was important for us on our very first day on this tour. We went to Cynthia McKinney Parkway, which is, I have the honor of having a street in my hometown that's named after me. That street just happens to be the street on which the Ku Klux Klan used to march as they went to their state headquarters to burn their crosses, which was Stone Mountain Park. So we also went to Stone Mountain Confederate Memorial Park, and we saw the relief that's been etched and carved into the stone of the generals of the Confederacy. Upon leaving that side of town, we went into downtown Atlanta, and we visited the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, where both Dr. King and Coretta are buried. Now, all of that, as a Southerner, all of that is my history. And I don't want anyone, the statue Taliban, coming to tell me what my history is. They're coming from New York or Massachusetts or California, wherever they're coming from. They're coming into the South to tell me what my history is. Now, I do understand that there's a problem with the narrative, and the narrative needs to include every aspect of what my history is, because, right, quite frankly, the narrative has only included one part of the experience. But we can work on the narrative as we work on ourselves. But don't come and tell me what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and you have not lived in my life. You have not lived my life or lived my experiences.
The bottom line is, instead of a top-down narrative from the CIA and the mainstream media and hashtag Google Gestapo, we need a bottom-up narrative, period.
Absolutely. So I have two concerns that I want to bring up. One is probably outside the scope of this conversation, but I think they're critical concerns to address in terms of accomplishing what we want. And one concern, which is probably outside the scope of this conversation, is as a holistic doctor who's been in private practice for 30 years, I'm seeing Americans get sicker and sicker and sicker. And so many holistic practitioners are getting bumped off. And when we have something wonderful to share with people, the FDA ties our hands because we can't make any claims. So it's very difficult for the public to get empowered information. That's one concern. A second concern is that I don't know how we can have a rational, intelligent citizenry with tremendous censorship of information. And this may be more germane to this conversation. I'm very concerned about what I see happening with Google, Facebook, and YouTube. I live here in the Silicon Valley, and there are a lot of people here that have a lot of money that think they're really smart, and they think they're really sophisticated, and they think they really know what's going on, and they don't have a clue because they're getting their information from so much sordid, censored ideas. And so when people who have this kind of social economic power here in the Valley are so arrogant and so duped, it raises huge red flags for me. I know so many people that are doing good work that are getting their YouTube channels demonetized. It's really serious. And so I wanted to ask you, especially Robert, as the tactician here,
Yes,
have you come up with parallel ways of having us communicate?
We had a 6-hour meeting with John McAfee last night. McAfee.
Who is he?
You have to look him up. I'm not going to spend time on that.
He's an internet guru. It would be nice.
He's the original guy. Yeah. Okay.
Be nice.
Okay. Bottom line is he's world famous and anybody can look him up. But here's what's going to happen in the future. First off, we need election reform because the U.S. government is a criminal network. The FDA and the CDC, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Center for Disease Control are both criminal networks in the full employment of the pharmaceutical industry and the mega agriculture industry and so forth. So to restore integrity to our government, we need to start by restoring integrity to our Congress. Now, I do believe that we are going to put Google, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube out of business within about 5 years. And one of the things that we've been discussing, not only with John McAfee, but also with I've actually visited Julian Assange's office in London. And I think there are some players out there that can come together to do 3 things. A cryptocurrency that is not controlled by the banks, a citizens information forum that cannot be censored, and electronic voting or e-voting that is not controlled by Diebold and that is transparent in its own blockchain kind of way. These things are all starting to germinate. Also, all of the truth movements are starting to converge. It's unfortunate that activists, both medical activists and environmental activists, are being murdered. And the FBI is doing nothing about this because the FBI is a theatrical agency. It actually sponsors most of the terrorists in the United States of America through entrapment. There's an excellent book called The Terror Factory, which shows the last 175 terrorist convictions were actually fully funded by the FBI. And the one that sticks in my mind is the retarded Muslim kid that was given $3,000 by the FBI to move out of his mother's home and get an apartment and start a terrorist cell. And then, of course, they arrested him and convicted him. How stupid do you have to be as an FBI officer to do something like this? Or unprofessional. So my highest ambition in life is to run the open source agency, which has been approved by the Office of Management and Budget twice. And one of the reasons I was hoping Donald Trump would pay attention to #UNRIG is because not only would it give him a base that would allow him to survive the demise of the Republican Party, it would also give him the citizen democracy, this whole truth mechanism that cannot be censored. With blockchain technology and all these other things, you can actually make it so no one can censor you. And you can also have citizen voting and waiting, and there's kind of the smell test, and so people will vote down if they don't agree. They'll bring in new information and so forth. So for me, I think we're doing what we need to do, but the initiative is going to have to pass to citizens. So I hope if this tape is useful in any way in inspiring one power cell to talk to one member of Congress, that we have done our duty as citizens.
David, I would just like to, I don't know, maybe make a small minor critique of Robert's thrust at election reform legislation, because we have the most important legislation in our country, which is the United States Constitution. And we already have legislation that is absolutely being ignored. So another piece of legislation is not going to actually save us. It is we who have to save ourselves.
I totally agree with that. The U.S. Constitution is not being followed. For example, we have, I think, over 11 elective wars that have not been approved by Congress. The system is rigged. And I mean, if I could say to Donald Trump, Mr. President, let us help you, please.
Are executive orders constitutional or not constitutional?
Executive orders are constitutional. However, they have to conform with the Constitution. And so we will find out in particular about the travel ban executive orders that were issued by President Trump. We will find out their constitutionality as the Supreme Court will make its decision soon.
And I don't agree with Cynthia on everything. I think they're unconstitutional. I think they're a form of backdooring legislation. I agree with Ron Paul. I agree with Ron Paul, and let me just this phone off. I agree with Ron Paul that all executive orders should be canceled. Now, I also think the federal government needs to be reduced by about 70%, and the federal budget needs to be reduced about 70%. What we have is a government that's grown insane, and they're regulating everything. For example, when I use a power cord in the lawn, it's got these two stupid little tags with small print that say stuff that I'm never going to read. And so I really believe that it's important that we end this monstrosity of a federal government that is regulating everything. We need to drop back down to local governance and community governance.
Well, I think that's something that the people need to decide.
Yes. Yes, yes. I'm not trying to say by fiat or whatever, but I think we need to restore of, by, and for we the people. And I absolutely believe the Constitution has been trashed, and that should be our highest priority after restoring integrity to Congress. I also want to overturn some of the amendments. The amendment on the income tax, the amendment on the Federal Reserve, and the amendment that took senators away from their states. Senators should represent their states. That was the Founding Fathers' original vision. The House of Representatives represents the people, district by district. So we need to wrap this up, David, but I'm very, very pleased with how you've managed this conversation, and I thank you very, very much for giving us an opportunity to appear together.
You're very welcome. Is there anything either of you would like to say in closing, and also in particular, if there's any contact information you'd like to give out for people who've been moved and inspired by this conversation and would like to take some action steps to get plugged in?
Well, people can reach out to me at my website, allthingscynthiamckinney.com. So I would encourage people to go there, visit, use the contact form, and send a message to me.
And also, of course, we do need donations. We're trying to raise $250,000 so we can do this for 2 months rather than just 2 weeks. So we need $250,000. That covers a whole bunch of expenses, including staff. But this RV is fully paid for by donors. We have no debts, no obligations. And I would say to people, look up Indiegogo-UNRIG, and you'll get right to the donation website. We have been under grave attack. Our donations have dropped from $2,000 a day to $50 a day. This is a tangible, material, financial wound.
You could say that the deep state has recognized us.
Yes.
And the deep state is fighting us.
Yes.
And so we need the people who care about their country and who care about themselves and their futures to help us.
And the last donation link is paypal.me/EarthIntel. And that comes to us directly and pays for gas. So please donate if you like this idea.
Now, my understanding, I don't know about you, Dr. McKinney, but my understanding is that Robert is not taking a salary.
And neither is Dr. McKinney.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a job.
All right. So, you know, it's been an honor. It's been an honor to play a small part in this movement toward authentic self-expression and true community. And I honor both of you, and I love what you guys are doing. And if there's anything else I can ever do for you, please let me know.
We don't sell anything, but we would love to see people buy polo shirts. And because it's #UNRIG, there's no special fee. You just go to anybody that sells polo shirts, any embroidery shop, and get your #UNRIG shirt at your own expense from someone else. We're not selling anything. We're trying to share an idea. So thank you, David, and God bless America, and God bless our legitimately elected president, and let's see what happens in the next few months.
God bless everybody.
So let me just formally close it out. So ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching or listening to a special edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, where we do in-depth, powerful interviews with individuals that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing or spirituality or social transformation. My special guests today have been Dr. Cynthia McKinney and Robert David Steele. I'm Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc, and with that, we'll close with love and peace. Bye for now.
Okay.